Good morning, everyone. I know we've still got people flowing in from the meeting upstairs. I am Reverend Karen LeBlanc, and I am the minister to this church as we minister to each other here. We are a beloved community of people who believe that everyone is worthy of respect, that science is real, the democratic process is a sacred thing, that we are all part of an interconnected web, and that the light and energy that we share and put out makes a difference in this world. We are people of purpose here at First Unitarian Church. And if this resonates with you, this idea, well, I hope you will consider becoming part of this way cool family of seekers and keepers of this long dream that is our church. A little bit of housekeeping. If you are new here and you would like more information about our church, fill out one of these blue cards. Put your phone number, your email on there, and you will get our newsletter to tell you all about all the stuff going on at our church. And if you've seen this month's calendar in your newsletter, it is jam-packed with stuff. Join us for coffee hour after the service right through that door for a good conversation and some nibbles. We are live streaming, so please keep that in mind. And if you would put your phones into worship mode, we will begin by lighting our chalice. Yasmin, you want to give us a hand with that? We light this chalice for those who convinced us that it was safe to share our longings, for those who proved that not everyone will run from the weight of the pain we carry, for those who held us in our fear and helped us heal from our regret, for those whose humble apologies made us believe that we too could be forgiven, and for those whose tenderness helped us to see that we no longer need to hide. Our vulnerability frees us and it binds us. It makes holy the path that we travel together. So may this flame ever help us keep that in view. Our opening words this morning are from Reverend Gretchen Haley, by permission. There is nothing you need to bring with you to be welcomed here. No right belief, no proof of citizenship, no eternal optimism or clarity of conviction, no boundless courage or endless expertise. You do not need to know what you brought here or how you will solve the problem you are turning over and over and over in your mind. Your bills do not need to be paid, and your checkbook can be a mess. Your children may have been up half the night. Your hearing aids may not be working, and your knees may be creaking. You do not need to already be perfect, or even halfway, to belong in this circle where grace meets us where we are, but does not leave us as it found us. Where love resides in each of us, yet is somehow more than all. Where life still pulses and rages and heals and transforms, creating us and this day anew once again. Come, let us worship together. And now, my friends, if you would like to join me in singing our opening hymn, please rise as you are willing and able and sing with me number 108, 108.
On in endless song above her lamentation, I hear the real, though far off hymn that hails a new creation. Through all the tumult and the strife, I hear the music ringing. It sounds an echo in my soul. How can I keep from singing? What through the tempest round me roars, I know the truth it liveth. What through the darkness round me close, songs in the night it giveth. No storm can shake my inmost calm, while to that rock I'm clinging. Since love prevails in heaven and earth, how can I keep from the singing? When tyrants tremble as they hear the bells of freedom ringing, when friends rejoice both far and near, how can I keep from the singing? To prison cell and dungeon vile, our thoughts to them are winging. When friends by shame are undefiled, how can I keep from the singing?
Amen. How can we keep from singing? Being together. Everyone, please greet your neighbors. Say hello this morning. So nice to see everyone here this morning. Please stay upright if you would. Remain standing. And we are going to read our covenant together, which is printed in your order of service. We come together as a religious community, upholding freedom of conscience, right relationship, and the inherent worth of all people. We value our diversity and pledge to care for one another in the spirit of compassion, to speak and listen to each other with respect, and to promote justice and kindness in the world. Miss Yasmin, you got a story for us.
I do. And you know who else has a story for us? The birds. They're returning. I don't know if you're starting to hear it, but the other night it was dusk and I went out and I said, whoa, like, this is like, y'all are like loud. And I feel like they were talking to me. And Fred Giffen, a member here, or former member, they live in Florida now, he gave me this hummingbird's nest. And it's so cute. And I thought, oh, I need to make sure everyone knows. This month, the theme is vulnerability, right? The courage. And can you imagine these birds, like the courage to like fly, like at night? I can't even see at night. Like, I just find it fascinating. I also wanted to share with you during our Soul Matters session last Sunday, we had a little workshop where people who were there were invited to share things they love about the church and things that they wanted to maybe see better about the church. So I turned it into a little book for easy viewing and reading. So I'll have that downstairs as well because it's really special and it's nice to see the work being validated. So moving into that, I'm going to tell you about a story called The Case for Loving. I just think it's so perfect that this gentleman's last name is Loving. So I did the math, and it was 54 years ago. You couldn't marry someone you loved because of the color of their skin. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm 50. So that means like, what? I just don't understand that, and I think that's the beauty of this next population is they don't know that that didn't exist, but I need to make sure they do because it seems like this, again, is we're still fighting and we need to keep this going. So this is a story called The Case for Loving, the fight for interracial marriage. What's really great about this book is that the author and illustrator are an interracial marriage couple. So we're reinforcing the case for loving. So, you know that song, first comes love, then comes marriage, then comes blah, blah, in the baby carriage. So that's sort of how it starts, but I'm just going to get into it. So Donald, Peggy, and Sidney had two parents who loved them so very much. In fact, the moment Richard Loving met Mildred Jeter, he wanted to get married and have a family right away. Richard was white, a fair-skinned boy, and Mildred was what they called colored. They actually called her String Bean. And in 1958, they lived in Central Point, Virginia. Richard Loving was a tall, quiet man of English and Irish descent. And the person he loved most was Mildred. And she was part American Indian and part African American. And when Richard popped the question, she jumped for joy. The two were in love, and they felt it should be their right to get married. Sadly, it was not. Not in Virginia or 16 other states. In those places, marriage between people of different races was against the law. 100 years earlier, slavery divided America along color lines. And even after slavery ended, some white people weren't allowed to be free, let alone marry who they wanted to. So Mildred and Richard wanted to get married, but they didn't want to spend time in prison. Now, although they couldn't have a legal marriage in Virginia, they could in Washington, D.C., and that's exactly what they did. They bustled down there across the state lines, and they said, "I do." And they were officially pronounced husband and wife. And they were so happy, and they couldn't wait to start their family. But soon, oh my gosh, in the middle of the night, the police came. "What are you doing with that woman?" And he's pointing to the wall. "Well, that's my marriage certificate." "Well, that is not good here." And lo and behold, they were sent to jail, locked up for unlawful cohabitation. I'm sure you know what that means. It's unlawful the way they were treated. That's the problem here. And after a few nights behind bars, they were told they had to leave Virginia. And that's what they did. They packed their bags, they hugged their families, and they left to make a new home. And they moved to D.C., and they had Donald, Peggy, and Sidney. The city didn't really suit them too well. There was a lot of concrete and a lot of noise, and they were just really kind of country people. And they missed open spaces, but most of all, their family. So they wanted to return. So they said, "You know what? We're going to get some lawyers. We're going to fight." And by now, it was 1966, and the times they were changing. Brand new ideas like equal rights for people of all colors were replacing old, fearful ways of thinking. And the lawyers worked around the clock to make the case, and it was time to go to the Supreme Court. And on June 12, 1967, when the case of Loving versus Virginia began, Richard and Mildred stayed home with their children. They were nervous, and they were afraid they wouldn't win. And the state argued that in order to preserve the purity of the white race, blacks and whites must remain separate. Well, then it was the Loving's lawyers' turn to present their case. And they said it's unconstitutional to make marriage a crime because of race. And they had a message that Richard said, "Can you just tell the judge one thing? Can you just tell the court, I just love my wife? And it's just unfair that I can't live with her." And it didn't take long for a decision to be made. It was unanimous. The court ruled in favor of the Lovings, and interracial couples could now legally be married in Virginia. And they hugged, and they won their right to love. And they were free at last. Well, over 9 years after their arrest, the Lovings packed their bags and headed home, and they lived happily and legally ever after. And that is the story of Richard and Mildred Loving. I wanted to of course, I had to do a little Wikipedia search on this afterwards to make sure that we're all good with following through on things. And I realized they were hit. Richard died in 1975. He was hit by a drunk driver. And she lost her eye in the accident. And so I thought, oh my gosh, so thanks to the Lovings, we're all able to love as we do. And I'm taking my bird's nest.
Thank you, Yasmin. Kids, you want to go to Sunday school? You know, we think this was only 50 years ago, right? That little more than 50 years ago when it was illegal to marry someone of a different color. And to us, that sounds crazy. What else is crazy is that Yasmin could be fined in Florida for reading that book, maybe even prosecuted in Florida right now in 2023 for reading that book. You won't find that book in a classroom in Florida. You probably won't find it in a library in Florida anymore. Think about that. Not in Massachusetts. Go Massachusetts! Hopefully we stay this liberal. Now is the time in our service where we share with each other our joys, our concerns. If you have something you would like to share, please come on up, tell us your name, and give us a brief description of your joy or sorrow. Come on up, Tony.
Hi, I'm Tony Ann. I guess like what Yasmin just read kind of struck a chord with me because Izzy and I are an interracial couple, and it kind of like that's something that we take for granted, the fact that we can just be together. It's like seeing the history of that makes me even more appreciative of something that we take for granted on many days. Is that we can love each other and spend time with each other in complete like safety and comfort, knowing that we have a community and a place where it is accepted and that people can still appreciate that kind of love without having to look at racial lines.
Amen, sister.
Hi, my name is Camilla, and this made me think about how in 2016, my wife and I decided, after 30 years of being together, that it was important for us, for our safety's sake, because of who had become president, that we should get married, which we did. But it isn't entirely something that we even still take for granted, because there are threats all over this country to the freedom of every person to love whom they want to. So let us remember those who are still struggling, whether they're people of color or trans folks or LGBTQ folks in other states. So.
Good morning, church. Good morning. I got a couple of things to say. Number one, my cat attitude of 23 years passed this Thursday, and it's freaked me out. I mean, well, I don't have to explain it. Some of us have pets. We know what that is. So it made me very sad. Sort of made my life discombobulated a little bit. Second thing I want to say is I want to give you some good news. The Social Justice Committee met this week, and we'll have an incredible, dynamic, bright, talented group of people. And you're going to be getting copies of our minutes tonight, because everybody has to do their final edit of the stuff. And one of the things that came up in the discussions was this business that, when it's very apropos for what Jasmine and Cameron said today, that just because you are a certain characteristic, that is, you're black, you're trans, you're gay, whatever, doesn't make you holy. You're not free from the biases and the prejudices of our society. Some of us talked about what's happening with young people in terms of how they're suffering from other young people in terms of prejudice of their trans or queer status. So for them, I urge a special prayer. We're not out of the woods by any means, but we're, as they say, as Curtis Mayfield say, we keep on pushing, and we're not going to give up on the capacity of our people to love and to overcome these terrible things. So those are my two things, and I just wanted you to know that our committee is alive and well, and you'll be very proud of them for the kind of work that they're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry about your cat, Matt. Going to light a couple candles here. One we met last week and we signed up 2 new members. One person that had come here for the first time, and she's a longtime UU, and I said, "You sure you don't want to think about this?" She said, "No, I like you people. Let's sign me up." Okay, we'll take it. And Tony Ann, and we're going to have Isaiah, I hope, sign up today. And I'm trying to encourage people, if you do want to join this church, to join now before the annual meeting, because you have to be a member for 30 days before the annual meeting to vote. So I'm trying to encourage, and that's in May, but we are having a new member service at the end of April, so anyone who would like to join and become a real, true, live member, that would be great. So see me afterward. I do have the book up here today. And I lit one candle for a woman named Melissa Lynn Eccleston. I did her memorial service yesterday. She was a police dispatcher here in New Bedford for 21 years, and she died after a long illness at 47 years old. So I pray for her, that she is in the arms of the mother. And I lit our healing candle. I didn't mention this last week, so if anyone has any healing they'd like to put out for anyone that's ill, let me know. But also I'm lighting this because I got a great text from our sister Lisa Durr that said some of the lesions that she had have disappeared completely and the others have shrunk. And this is amazing, literally miraculous news for the kind of cancer that she has. And she's gonna fight it, she's gonna beat it, and we will be here, and she will be here with us for many years to come, from our mouths to God's ears. Amen. Join with me now to read our responsive reading, which is also in your order of service. I will read the plain type if you will answer with the bold type. To laugh is to risk appearing a fool. To weep is to risk appearing sentimental. To place your ideas and dreams before a crowd is to risk their loss. To hope is to risk despair. To try is to risk failure. The person who risks nothing, does nothing, has nothing. Let us enter now into the spirit of prayer and meditation. This is by Reverend Tamara Liebeck. Holy One, who has given us the breath of life, today we remember to breathe deeply, to rest, to take in, to pause before we act, and then take in another deep breath, poised on the edge, and risk jumping in, risk taking action, risk speaking up, risk using the gifts we have been given, so that at the end of our life we can say with absolute clarity that no part of our existence was wasted in fear of failure or fear of success. Hold us. Prepare us the way to begin to offer the gift of our awakened presence, full of love and light today. These and the prayers of our hearts we lift up now in the silence. Amen. Second reading this morning is from the great Howard Thurman. There is something in you that waits and listens for the sound of the genuine in other people. And if you can't hear it, then you are reduced by that much. If I were to ask you what is the thing that you desire most in life, you would say a lot of things off the top of your head, most of which you wouldn't believe, but you would think that you were saying the things that I thought you ought to think that you should say. But I think if you were stripped to whatever there is in you that is literal and irreducible, and you tried to answer that question, the answer may be something like this: I want to feel that I am thoroughly and completely understood, so that now and then I can take my guard down and look around me and not feel that I will be destroyed with my defenses down. I want to feel completely vulnerable, completely naked, completely exposed, and absolutely secure. It's a lot to ask, Mr. Thurman. Now, rise as you are willing and able and sing with me, number 97, Sometimes I Feel Like a Motherless Child. 97.
Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. A long way from home. A long way from home. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. A long way from home. A long way from home. Sometimes I feel like I'm almost gone. Sometimes I feel like I'm almost gone. Sometimes I feel like I'm almost gone. A long way from home. A long way from home.
Thank you, Tony Ann. You got the voice for gospel, sister. Have a seat, everyone. Now is the time in our service where we ask you for your kind donations toward the many good works of this church. Could we have someone help Ned, please, so he is not doing this alone? Thank you. Okay, here we go. Okay. Wow, everybody wants to help. We thank you for your kind donations. Soul Matters theme this month is vulnerability. Did a lot of thinking about this week. Brené Brown, who has done extensive research on concepts like courage and failure and vulnerability, said in her book, Daring Greatly, according to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, the word vulnerability is derived from the Latin word vulnerare, meaning to wound. The definition includes capable of being wounded and open to attack or damage. Merriam-Webster defines weakness as the inability to withstand attack or wounding. Just from a linguistic perspective, it's clear that these are very different concepts. And in fact, one could argue that weakness often stems from a lack of vulnerability. When we don't acknowledge how and where we are tender, we're more at risk of being hurt. I've done a lot of reading and thinking this week, as I said, about being vulnerable and how that means different things to different people. Though we all experience it, certainly, we understand it and process it differently. We can be hyper aware of what we perceive to be our own vulnerabilities and mostly completely unaware of what others' vulnerabilities are. And see how we already tie vulnerability with weakness in our own minds. And even if those concepts are really different and nuanced, the result is the same. We get hurt, we get wounded. And that fear of being hurt, emotionally hurt, or even physically hurt, is deep inside of us. We act up, we act out because of it sometimes. Reverend Megan Foley writes, I'm beginning to realize that all of my big negative emotions, anger, intolerance, crankiness, the list goes on, have their root in my feeling vulnerable. So I've been practicing feeling vulnerable rather than that secondary feeling. So if I'm able to say, I'm feeling vulnerable, rather than say, you're making me mad, then there is much more room for connection and healing. I get that. Being able to recognize that those feelings of anger and intolerance, etc., are often rooted in feeling vulnerable, that takes a little bit of practice, takes a little switch in how we process. So I've been trying to do that exercise this week after reading about that. When I was having negative feelings, to step back and really ask myself if this is vulnerability that I'm feeling. And where is it coming from, Is it because I feel disempowered or ignored? Because I feel like I've been laughed at? Or because I'm embarrassed that I got something wrong? Putting it into words specifically has been helpful for me. I was in a mood when I got home on Thursday this past week. I was really cranky and I felt kind of depressed and I just wanted to take a nap. And I asked myself, why am I feeling like this? I don't even know why I'm upset. But then it came to me. The answer was, because I had my shirt on backwards most of the day. Yep. And I discovered it while I was sitting at a table with two clergy people at a meeting. So I was immediately a little embarrassed. I don't even think that they noticed. But the embarrassment made me anxious. So instead of excusing myself to go to the restroom and deal with it like a lady, I instinctively pulled both of my hands inside, quickly flipped my shirt around, and poked my arms back out. Yeah. And then I went, ha, 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 look, my shirt was on backwards. Ha, 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 ha. And seriously, I don't think that anyone had noticed that my shirt was on backwards, and I felt like an idiot. Okay, so we all laughed it off, ha, ha, ha. But it stuck to me, and I was cranky and depressed by the time I got home. And making that connection to know I'm not depressed just because I'm having a crappy day. I'm depressed because I was embarrassed, and it stuck to me. And that turned out to be empowering to realize that. It occurred to me that being able to be vulnerable can be empowering in many ways. But at the same time, power and vulnerability are sort of opposite sides of the same coin, right? Being vulnerable can be empowering when we have places that are safe for us to be ourselves with people who love us for who we are, no strings attached. That's the beloved community we're trying to create here. We talked a little bit last week in our Feed Your Soul Sunday session about belonging, about how we all want to feel like we belong, and sometimes we don't. We feel vulnerable when we feel like the odd person out of a group, right? Well, when we actually get to talking to each other, when we are heard and supported, that sense of belonging is cultivated. It's cultivated around the stories of ourselves and our lives that we share with each other. And being comfortable enough to tell our story, being our authentic selves in front of others, is empowering. Brené Brown said, "Owning our story can be hard, but not nearly as difficult as spending our lives running from it. Embracing our vulnerabilities is risky, but not nearly as dangerous as giving up on love and belonging and joy, the experiences that make us most vulnerable." And that's the short and long of it, right? If we want to be loved, if we want to be accepted, if we want to belong, we have to take a risk. The great theologian C.S. Lewis said, "To love at all is to be vulnerable. Love anything, and your heart will be wrung and possibly broken. If you want to keep it intact, you must give it to no one, not even an animal. Wrap it carefully around with hobbies and little luxuries. Avoid all entanglements. Lock it up safe in the casket or coffin of your selfishness. But in that casket, safe, dark, motionless, airless, it will change. It will not be broken. It will become unbreakable, impenetrable, and irredeemable." That to me sounds a lot worse than feeling the pain and loss of heartbreak. There are fates worse than death, my friends. And one of them is never feeling safe enough to be able to live your own truth. I've read a few quotes today from Brené Brown, because if you're looking for articles about courage or vulnerability, you will be directed right there almost immediately. She has been the darling of the TED Talk circuit for decades, and she's done a lot of research on this topic. But I read an interesting blog post this week from a Dr. Carrie Yazid titled, "The Dangers of Courage Culture and Why Brené Brown Isn't for Black Folks." And it was eye-opening. Dr. Yazid had been following a thread on Twitter where the author was airing her thoughts about Brené Brown. And the author actually said, Brené Brown encourages white supremacy because her courage culture is being led by suburban white women, but that black women don't have the luxury of being vulnerable or courageous because of societal obstacles that they have to overcome, which Brown never addresses. And as she and a few other black women with PhDs, by the way, who were speaking on this thread, they were all talking about how they had a hard time being supported in the literary and academic worlds, and they had to really fight to be seen and heard and read, and about how they are ignored when their writings do not subscribe to the theoretical practices of whites who have no understanding of the black experience. What do you think happened on that Twitter thread? those women's voices were blocked. They were silenced. They were taken out of the conversation because it made a lot of people uncomfortable. And it probably made a lot of people uncomfortable because people went, oh, you know, geez, wait, I like Brene Brown a lot. Hold on, I'm a middle-aged white woman. No wonder. Now, I don't think Brene Brown is a white supremacist or a racist. But it doesn't take much thinking about it to realize that, okay, yeah, her writings are centered on pretty first world white problems, right? And as inspiring as she can be and smart, her inability to consider how dangerous it can be for people of color, women of color in particular, to let themselves be vulnerable. It's hard. So the Dr. Yazid asked, after she had already been kicked on this thread, this is on her blog post, how can we be courageous and vulnerable when men and women become upset and start to cry about how we hate them every time black folk come together to talk about our lived experiences? This is exhausting. This exhausting defense mechanism has worked for centuries, having killed a lot of black people who were trying to be vulnerable and courageous as they spoke out against injustices taking place within their lives and communities. It is because of these conditions that courage culture, as we know it, is dangerous for blacks in America. She's right. Some people are much more vulnerable than others. We see it every day, how some people have found their place to belong with people who hate anyone who isn't like them, who doesn't believe what they do. And those people target black and brown people. They target Asians. They target LGBTQIA folk. They target Muslims and Jews. They target women. They make it dangerous to be who you are. They make it dangerous to tell our stories and to simply live our lives. And it's only getting worse, my friends. It's only getting worse, and that's the really sad part. Feels like we should have come a lot further, doesn't it? Like I said, look at what's happening in Florida, right? Don't say gay. Don't say black. Disregard any history that makes you feel bad or feel empathy for the other. Disregard the healthcare choices of women and trans persons. Those folks are being stripped of their right to tell their story, to be their authentic selves. They are deprived of the privilege of being vulnerable. When I was parked out at my thinking spot over in Fairhaven, it occurred to me, sitting alone in the middle of nowhere, that if a police car were to come up that narrow lane behind me where I was parked, I probably wouldn't think twice about rolling down my window and saying, "Hello, officer, can I help you?" But if I were black, I might start to panic that I was alone, where no one could hear me scream, and that I'm just sitting here thinking might not be a good enough answer to keep me alive. Then again, as a woman, you know what? I wouldn't pull over for a cop on a lonely black back road in the dark, not until I pulled into someone's lighted driveway where I knew that they were home, and that's actually happened to me. And you know what? The officer said, "I completely understood. I understand why you did that. And you should have. That is the safe thing to do. Good for you." Because he knew some officers will take advantage of their power, and it's just smart to be safe, right? I know it shouldn't be like that, but it is. Whether we think of vulnerability as a strength or a weakness, a privilege or a right, everyone experiences it, and we can't forget that. No one is built of solid stone and doesn't have any vulnerabilities. They wouldn't be human. I heard a show on NPR yesterday that black women's mortality rate from giving birth is double what it is for white women because they are not listened to by their doctors when they say that they don't feel right. There's something wrong with that. Our Jewish and LGBTQ neighbors are attacked on the streets by hate groups. Middle-aged white men are more likely to commit suicide than any group in this country. They're vulnerable. Children are vulnerable to catching a bullet in their grammar school or their high school. What's up with that? All this fear is not healthy. It's not healthy for us, and fear just compounds and compounds. The author and mystic Tokopah said, "We've made a hedging around the very places we should be depending on each other. We've privatized pain. And then it's hard to reach out. It's hard to be seen with your messy lostness. Exhaustion overwhelms as you stumble through the complexities of life. But how else can someone become trustworthy unless you allow them to share in your hardship? How can we form the village we ache for unless we allow ourselves to wrestle with these things together?" Indeed, we can only do this work together, folks. When a wounding befalls any one of us here, we are all implicated. In this emotionally impoverished culture, we are rarely invited to share our burdens as well as our joys, but that is exactly what we're trying to do here. We shoulder unbearable questions together. We lean in to support those in pain, and we give our gifts of empathy and presence. We develop a trust in each other that we can be our true selves, and we are loved for it, warts and all. This is a safe place. This is a village in the making, and a place where everyone can find a way to feel like they belong, I hope. We're going to keep cultivating that. So may we work hard to ensure that we always lead with love and remember that every one of us are vulnerable. So let's act like that when we interact with each other. Give each other the respect we all deserve. Amen. And may it be so, my friends. May it be so. Now, join me in our final hymn. Please rise as you are willing and able. Number 99. 99. Nobody knows.
Nobody knows the trouble I've seen. Nobody knows my sorrow. Nobody knows the trouble I've seen. Glory, hallelujah. Sometimes I'm up, sometimes I'm down. Oh, yes, Lord. Sometimes I'm almost to the ground. Oh, yes, Lord. Nobody knows the trouble I've seen. Nobody knows my sorrow. Nobody knows the trouble I've seen. Glory, hallelujah. Although you see me go along so, oh yes, Lord, I have my troubles troubles here below. Oh, yes, Lord. Nobody knows the trouble I've seen. Nobody knows my sorrow. Nobody knows the trouble I've seen. Glory, hallelujah. One day when I was heaven's broke, oh yes, Lord, the heavens broke and love came down. Oh yes, Lord. Nobody knows the trouble I've seen. Nobody knows my sorrow. Nobody knows the trouble I've seen. Glory, hallelujah.
Okay. We are the ones we have been waiting for. We are not perfect, but we are perfectly fit for this day. We are not without fault, but we can be honest to face our past as we chart a new future. We are the ones we have been waiting for. So may we be bold and courageous to chart that new future. May we have faith in a future that is not known. We are the ones we have been waiting for, people. Go in peace. Hold fast. We love you. Stay strong. Live long and prosper. Be well.